Good morning. I'm Joseph Berger. I'm the Provost and Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs here at UMass Boston. And it's my great pleasure to welcome you to the 21-22 academic year Convocation, our opening ceremony here at UMass Boston. It brings me tremendous joy to be here with you, live and in 3D. You know, the start of the new academic year is always exhilarating, right? Full of the hope of new promise, new students, new classes, coming back from a summer of recharging, reinvigorated. But this year, it's really special. The fact that we've been primarily remote, for more than 18 months, making tremendous efforts to continue learning, studying, researching, engaging, is a real testament to our academic community. And I've been really heartened as we've come back here together over the last 3 weeks to see the excitement and the energy as we get a chance to reconnect in ways that we really have not been able to, that we need as social communities. And I've been particularly heartened by our students and seeing our students bustling with energy across the entire campus. And many of them who have reached out to me in appreciation for all the work that all of us have done together to be ready to reopen as a campus community on campus. But we also recognize that we're still in and going through the devastating COVID-19 pandemic. And we have a collective responsibility to prioritize the physical, the mental, the emotional, and the social health of each individual and of our collective community. It's an obligation that we all share. None of us can be bystanders in the effort to keep everyone healthy and safe. So I'm grateful for all of the work that everyone has done to make this possible. And as we continue our hard work and vigilance to emphasize health and safety as our utmost priority. But it's also clear that this pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, has exacerbated and laid bare the racialized inequities that have long permeated every aspect of our society. Recognizing that we are embedded in a society that perpetuates systemic racism, oppression, discrimination, and being cognizant of the inherent whiteness that has and continues to dominate and define higher education writ large. We here at UMass Boston choose to confront and reject the scourge of systemic racism in all of its forms. And on our campus here, we continue to build on a unique mission, on a historical passion for promoting inclusion, equity, and social justice. Yet, we have no laurels to rest on. We must continue to work harder, accomplish more, be innovative as opponents of the inherent whiteness, racism, and anti-blackness that continue to dominate our society and institutions of higher education. This is clearly a pivotal moment. It's a pivotal moment for the world, for our society, but it's also a truly significant new chapter for UMass Boston. We are here together moving into a future with renewed dedication to our commitment to equity and anti-racism, to becoming a leading anti-racist and health-promoting institution, with new permanent leadership, with the development of what will be a stunning new campus quad right out here that will enhance what is already a beautiful, stunning waterfront. And I'll steal a term from Chancellor Suárez-Orozco, beautiful waterfront locational endowment that we have here at UMass Boston, and a new mission-oriented strategic path forward. To that end, we are launching a deep and broad campus-wide strategic and master planning process. By the way, today, if you're interested in serving on the many committees, today is the day, last day to volunteer, or to volunteer others. But we want you all involved, engaged. This is a community endeavor. And out of this work, we will generate a 10-year vision-oriented plan that will provide a map for enhancing existing academic programs, establishing new ones, developing facilities that better support our academic research and community engagement missions, and for developing a new budgeting model that will allow us to be the architects of our own destiny in the years coming forward, so that we can best realize our potential and our responsibility as Boston's only public research university. Thus, it is in this special moment that we gather here, and we're honored to come together for the first time this year as a community and to welcome Dr. Tyrone Howard, who will share his powerful and eloquent expertise that speaks to the very issues that we continue to champion and confront in terms of truth, equity, and inclusive excellence. So, Dr. Howard, the Chancellor will formally introduce you in a moment, but I want to personally welcome you here on behalf of UMass Boston and myself. So speaking of honoring people, one of the great parts of my job is I get to honor and recognize the amazing range of talent that we have throughout our campus, including our stellar faculty. So we have our own colleagues to honor here, and it gives me immense pleasure to congratulate 47 of our faculty colleagues who have been recognized with promotions for the quality of their research, the impact of their teaching, and the value of their service. We have 17 faculty members who have received tenure and were promoted to associate professor. Fourteen colleagues were promoted to the rank of full professor. And 16 faculty members were promoted to senior lecturer. I note that your names are listed on the screens on either side of me, but I also ask that you all rise so we can applaud your accomplishments. Congratulations to all of you. Next, I would like to take a moment to introduce several new deans, and we have several. Tyson King Meadows, our new dean of the College of Liberal Arts. Laura Hayden, the interim at Tyson. Laura Hayden, Interim Dean of the College of Education and Human Development. Rosanna DeMarco, Interim Dean of the College of Nursing and Health Sciences. Kiki Yadozi, Interim Dean of the John W. McCormick Graduate School of Policy and Global Studies. Rajni Srikanth, our new Dean of Faculty. And Susan Gauss, Interim Dean of the Honors College. Thank you. We are also pleased to welcome 20 new tenure-track faculty colleagues recruited to the campus this academic year through national searches. Your names are also listed on the screens. But if I could ask all of you who are here this morning to rise so that we can recognize you. Welcome to you all. And before we go any further, I also want to offer special recognition of the members of our teaching faculty, those colleagues in the ranks of lecturer, senior lecturer, and associate lecturer who do so much to enhance the educational experience of our students and contribute to the scholarly portfolio of this university. I would like to ask all members of the non-tenure track faculty, whether new or continuing, to stand and be appropriately recognized. Ensuring that the university builds intellectual strength every year is an important mission. There is no better way to reach that goal than to bring in new voices of the faculty. And now I have the genuine pleasure of introducing our Chancellor, Marcelo Suárez-Orozco.
Thank you, Provost Berger, for your leadership and commitment to and support for our endeavors at UMass Boston. Good morning, Beacons. You look fantastic. I am so honored to be here with you this morning. Welcome. Welcome to Boston's numero uno public research university, the University of Massachusetts, Boston. Especially warm welcome to our students, new and returning. Welcome, new and returning faculty, administrators, and staff. As we today reaffirm our commitment to educating the next generation of leaders and fulfilling the mission of our university, and a very special warm welcome, as we say in Los Angeles, bienvenido to Professor Tyrone Howard. We thank you all for your commitment to UMass Boston and look forward to sharing with you a successful, safe 2020 2021-2022 academic year. First, let us take a moment to recognize the recent tragedies in Afghanistan and Haiti, and the tremendous suffering these events inflicted on the human family. We share our deepest sympathies with those in our UMass Boston and global communities who have experienced loss or otherwise been affected by these crises. And we offer our open arms and open hearts to those displaced by these tragic events. We are happy to be here today, face to face, for the first time in a year and a half. It is what you, our students, need and what you deserve. But we are not out of the woods yet. And we acknowledge the awful pain, loss, the anxiety, the concerns that COVID-19 has inflicted in so many of our communities, locally and around the world. We must, as scholars and engaged citizens, continue to work together to defeat this wicked pandemic. I thank all our students, all our faculty and staff for your efforts to keep our campus and our community safe. I ask now that we observe a moment of silence for those we lost to the terrible coronavirus pandemic. A moment of silence, please. Thank you. Following the traditions of convocations past, I would like to take a moment to recognize the winner of the 2021 John W. Ryan Award, an honor bestowed annually on the junior with the highest grade point average at the university. Named for our very first chancellor, the Ryan Award commemorates our first convocations and celebrates excellence in our student body. I am pleased to announce this year's winner, Tessa Lyman. Tessa, would you please join me in the stage? Congratulations. Proud of her, right? Wonderful. Beautiful. Tessa has compiled a stellar academic record, a cumulative grade point average of 4.0. She has earned a place in the Dean's List for 4 consecutive semesters. She is a graduate of Exeter West Greenwich Regional High School in Rhode Island and a member of the Honors College. She's studying social psychology, very important field, social psychology in the College of Liberal Arts with a minor in public policy. Congratulations, Tessa. Today marks the ceremonial start of a new academic cycle at our beautiful university on the shores of Dorchester Bay. As we look forward to this year, we are filled with hope and the promise of taking strides towards real, meaningful advance in our university's collective purpose. In particular, I will point 2 important initiatives that will continue to shape our university now and for years to come. First, the recent gift to our campus of $15 million from University of Massachusetts Board of Trustees, Robert Manning and his wife, Donna, will open a new chapter for the future of nursing and health sciences programs in our campus. Just last week, U.S. News & World Report ranked our undergraduate nursing program in the top 50 in the United States. The record-setting gift to support the newly renamed Robert and Donna Manning College of Nursing and Health Sciences will further enhance academic excellence and the college's ongoing mission to diversify the nursing and health sciences fields so that the next generation of caregivers will have the scientific and humanistic tools to carry on the work. And as Donna Manning herself articulated, they look, moving forward, more like the constituents they serve. Second, last week, as the Provost mentioned, we launched a university-wide strategic planning process to chart the future of Boston's great public research university. During this coming academic year, we will endeavor to set a course for UMass Boston for the years ahead. We invite all our communities, faculty, students, and staff, to think big and to think realistically as we set a course of work with concrete, actionable, measurable goals to hold ourselves accountable in turning our dreams and ideals into a living reality. Let me be perfectly clear. Moving forward, we will remain cautious and fiercely vigilant in light of the ongoing pandemic and the resurging Delta variant of the disease. Our priority from the very beginning of the pandemic has been to place safety, the safety of our students, the safety of our staff, the safety of our faculty, at the very top of our priorities, while continuously focusing on the continuity of our academic plan, with a firm belief that face-to-face, in-person education is both what our students want and what our students deserve. This year, we will continue to prioritize safety by closely adhering to the protocols recommended by the CDC and by multiple health bodies, experts. We will continue to monitor our campus community health via methodological surveillance testing, proper hygiene, while advocating vaccination and continuing to offer free vaccines to all. Our mission has always been to provide exemplary higher education to students who may not have access otherwise. We stand as a national leader in educating a diverse student body. Over the past 6 years, the percentage of undergraduate students of color has risen 10 points to 62% in the fall of 2020. We must continue to serve. We must continue to lead the way in this area through a comprehensive ethic of care, an ethic of responsibility, and a renewed commitment to the future of our nation. Demographically speaking, a future of more diversity with equity, inclusion, and justice at its core. We continue to chart the course in our never-ending quest to become an exemplary anti-racist, health-promoting urban public research university. Our mission is more important today than ever before. I make this claim because the natural world and all living systems on Earth continue to be ravished by a pandemic, by unchecked climate change, by structural racism, and by the undermining of the democratic process. I submit to you here and now that the assault on truth is now an existential threat to democracy and to human sustainability moving forward. From vaccinations to climate change, truth-seeking, truth-finding, truth-telling seem quixotic pursuits. Increasingly, it feels like we're all lost denizens in a dark empire of post-truth, where facts and their representation are secondary to emotion and personal preference. As President Marty Meehan and I wrote in a Boston Globe op-ed last week, we find ourselves in a moment in history that demands clear, honest, knowledge-based response to existential threats, ranging from climate change to pandemics to manipulated elections. Yet too often, our leaders are not only ignoring these threats, but elevating dishonest, artful pandering over difficult but honest decision-making. There appears to be a willingness to cautiously use deception when it is convenient. Increasingly, we Americans are navigating a world where facts are secondary to emotion, with no cognitive GPS to guide us forward. The problem is not just the corruption of language. As we have noted throughout history, lies have the power to pervert public policy, undermine institutions, fund hatred and violence, and claim lives. Nowhere is this malignancy more apparent today than in politics, where social media swamps breed misinformation and bad behavior. In her book, Democracy and Truth, A Short History, University of Pennsylvania history professor Sophia Rosenfeld notes that the relationship between democracy and truth has always been uneasy, a point that was first articulated by the great Hannah Arendt in a powerful essay in an earlier time. But what Professor Rosenfeld reminds us is that the extent of the truth crisis today has no historic precedent. Politics is not the only realm where truth is a casualty, however. Even the physical sciences, where empirical observation and immutable rules carry the day, are under attack, as the COVID-19 vaccine and so-called climate debates have demonstrated. Science offers us a lifeline to truth, but it is often swept aside in favor of ideology. More dangerously, it is denigrated by dark conspirational theories and rhetoric. Despite ever more clear evidence that vaccines represent our best shot to defeat the coronavirus pandemic, many politicians keep marching their followers into the dark forest of post-truth. The anti-vaccine movement includes fellow citizens that are driven by earnestly held beliefs. But make no mistake, it is also bolstered by a multi-billion-dollar industry that makes money whenever someone clicks on an outrageous anti-vaccine claim. In the face of overwhelming scientific evidence about climate change, too many policymakers continue to throw lies and misinformation into the machinery of science and evidence-based policymaking. According to the Center for American Progress, there are today 139 elected officials in the 117th Congress, including 109 representatives and 30 senators, who refuse to acknowledge the scientific evidence of human-caused climate change. As a public research university in the state that invented public education, we are especially concerned with advancing the truth-seeking that flow from historically constituted scholarly disciplines with shared schemas and agreed upon methodologies and practices. We speak of physical truths, psychological and neurological truths, anthropological truths, linguistic truths, mathematical truths, and so forth. We also understand that our society works best and our pursuit of truth is more robust when we engage all communities in its pursuit. To be sure, truth has always been contested territory in academia, and we're better off for it. But the search for truth animates the work of the modern public research university. It is in our DNA. Here, I submit to you what we must do to reverse the truth's insidious slide towards a slow death. First, we must continue to increase access to higher education, where truth, its pursuit, the seeking of truth, the finding of truth, the telling of truth, is a permanent matter of both scholarly inquiry and democratic citizenship. Universities should elevate truth-seeking, truth-finding, truth-telling to a sense of existential urgency. Second, we must expand experiential learning and encourage our students to focus on local problems, both of which lead to a better understanding of the real challenges and the transformative power of concrete solutions to local problems. Lies don't die with each passing news cycle. They are believed. They shape current and future behavior. Their impact is deep. Today, UMass Boston's call to arms must take the battle to the culture of anti-science, the culture of pessimism, culture of anomie, the culture of democratic disengagement. It starts with our endeavors to rescue the truth. Thank you, Beacons. Thank you for joining us this morning for this beautiful, beautiful convocation. It is now my great pleasure of introducing this year's convocation speaker, Dr. Tyrone Howard. Professor Howard is the Pritzker Family Endowed Chair in the School of Education and Information Studies at the University of California, Los Angeles. He is the director of the UCLA Pritzker Center for Strengthening Children and Families, the director, founder and director of the UCLA Black Male Institute, and the UCLA Center for the Transformation of Schools. An extraordinarily creative scholar, Professor Howard's research examines race, culture, and educational equity. A native of Compton, California, Professor Tyrone Howard has been a classroom teacher and now holds one of the most prestigious chairs at the University of California, Los Angeles. An extraordinary teacher, you're in for a treat. Professor Howard was named recipient of the University of California, Los Angeles Distinguished Teaching Award in 2015, the university's highest award for teaching excellence. Professor Howard was elected to the National Academy of Education in 2021, was named an AERA Fellow in 2018. Dr. Howard is author of 7 books and over 90 peer-reviewed journal articles, book chapters, reports, as well as multiple op-eds and other writings. During the last 5 years, every year, Dr. Howard has been listed by Education Week as one of the most influential scholars in the nation informing educational policy, practice, and reform. Professor Howard will address us today on the topic of race, education, and democracy. I give you Professor Tyrone Howard.
Good morning, everyone. So I'm still on West Coast time, so I need to feel your energy. Good morning, UMass Boston. It is my honor to be here. We are now making the elbow bump the new handshake and hug. So when I see you all, make sure you have a good elbow bump. So it's my honor and my sincere privilege to be here with you this fine, beautiful morning. I would like to thank you, the UMass Boston community, for the opportunity to be a part of your special day today. Your invocation, which is representative of new beginnings, new opportunities, new learning. It's just good to see people in person again. It's good to see people outside of little boxes. It's good to see your full bodies, because I've missed that. I don't take this invitation lightly, because this is the start of new horizons, new chances to learn, new opportunities to be in concert with each other. So this is something that I take with the most humble respect. I want to thank you for what you all have endured for the past 18 months. They've been trying for all of us. We've been in a situation where we've had to persevere. You've been flexible. We've all been poked. We've been prodded. We've learned how to Zoom. We've learned how to do lots of things that we never thought we've had to do. We've learned, we've loved, and unfortunately, many of us have sadly lost. But we are here. Thank you for enduring. Thank you for being flexible and patient. While we are not out of the woods, I'm a man of faith, and I believe that our better days are ahead. So thank you. I would also like to acknowledge and thank my dear brother and comrade in the struggle for justice and your esteemed Chancellor, Marcelo Suárez-Orozco. Can we give him a round of applause, please? He has been an inspiration for me, a role model, a fighter, and a friend. I admire his integrity. I am in awe of his work ethic, and I'm inspired by his unrelenting quest for inclusion, equity, justice, and humanity. You have a jewel here in Marcelo and his better half, Carola. Give her a round of applause, please. Thank you so much. Our loss was truly your gain. I want to talk about race, education, and democracy, racial realism, or radical hope. I think about this because I think about my standing before you today as a son of working-class parents, products of what Isabel Wilkerson called individuals who are in the pursuit of the warmth of other suns. Mine is a journey where struggle mattered. Mine is a journey where sacrifice mattered. Perseverance in the face of adversity mattered. But mine is also a struggle and a journey where I was told from a young age that race mattered. Race mattered because my parents talked about how they experienced segregated schools, how they experienced segregated communities, segregated lunch counters, segregated churches, segregated swimming pools. So even if they did not want to believe that race mattered, they were constantly told that race mattered. And because race mattered, that meant racism mattered, because racism was around them. So I was told at an early age that to be mindful of who you were racially and ethnically. But my father talked about the importance of education as a way to combat and eradicate racism. He said, education mattered. He told my brother and I on a regular basis, education matters. It's something that no one can ever take away from you. He said it was a tool to fight discrimination and prejudice. He said education was a mechanism to strengthen your mind and to create new possibilities. But also he talked about the fact that education was the mechanism that could bring you this 4-letter word called hope. And he told us that hope mattered. He said, so I want you to get your education, but he also made this point abundantly clear. He said, once you get your education, do not lose your mind once you get it. I'll say that again. He said, once you get your education, don't lose your mind when you get it. Never forget where you came from. That message stayed with me and has been the driving force behind why I do what I do. How do you get an education but not lose your mind in the process? In this current moment, as we sit here and we speak on this fine, beautiful day, there are many young people who are attempting to get their education without losing their minds in the process. See, racial segregation today is just as rampant today in 2021 as it was 60 years ago. Young people trying to get their education without losing their mind in the process. Too many of our jails and prisons are filled with some of the brightest minds you could ever imagine, because these were young people who were trying to get an education without losing their mind in the process. Part of what we have to recognize is that the disparities in school funding is wider today than it was 60 years ago. The hope that my father spoke about is wider for too many Americans, And for those whose education is most elusive happen to be individuals who are black and brown. As my father told me then, and it still remains the case today, race still matters. It mattered then, and it matters now. So while race and education have always mattered, and because they still do, one of the most vexing problems that we have to face in our global community is racial inequality and widespread wealth disparities, both nationally and globally. See, what we have to recognize as we talk about hope, ours is a world where 10% of households hold 70% of the nation's wealth, where the bottom 50% only hold 2% of the nation's wealth according to the Survey of Consumer Finances. Ours is a world and a nation where people of color have not just an education debt, but they also have a debt that is enormous and growing financially, from an income standpoint and from a wealth standpoint. We must tackle racial income and wealth equality if we are to uphold the beacons and principles of democracy. Education can and must play a role in that process. So in a democratic society, how can we say that we are beacons of justice and equality when we recognize that there are over 40 million people in our country who are living in poverty? 10 million children who live in deep poverty. Children are our most cherished possession, but too many live in poverty. 1 in 4 black children live in poverty. 1 in 5 Latinx children live in poverty. 1 in 5 indigenous children live in poverty. So when it comes to being poor, race matters in this country. How can we be beacons of justice and beacons of democracy when we recognize, according to the U.S. Housing and Urban Development, over 500,000 people are houseless in our country on any given night? And over 1.5 million children will go to bed tonight without roofs over their heads. We have to be better. We must do better. We must commit ourselves to those who are most vulnerable amongst us. How can we call ourselves beacons of democracy when we currently have a humanitarian crisis occurring at our southern border? As we sit here today, there are over 10,000 Haitian migrants living in some of the most inhumane conditions that one could ever imagine, seeking prosperity and seeking that 4-letter word that my father talked about, hope. We can be better. We must be better. We need to be better. Part of what I've learned from my dear brother, your Chancellor Marcelo Suárez-Orozco, is that immigration, as he says, is our past, immigration is our present, immigration is our future. He says, and I quote, "Immigrants play an important role in the Massachusetts economy. Immigrants account for 1 in 5 Massachusetts workers, 1 in 4 Massachusetts entrepreneurs, and they contribute $36.4 billion in consumer spending and $4.5 billion in state and local taxes every year." Let us be abundantly clear and unapologetic that immigration matters. Immigrants are the fabric of our economy in this country. So we have to be better. We have to recognize that if we're going to be beacons of democracy and justice, we have to recognize that we have 17 states that have written new legislation to restrict voting rights in this country, to limit political participation. In these 17 states, the laws will affect our most disenfranchised communities. These laws will primarily affect people and communities of color the hardest. So even when it comes to political participation, again, we find that race and class matters. We cannot say that we are beacons of democracy and justice when we recognize the fact that women of color continue to be our hardest working and most economically depressed group of people in our nation. Women of color oftentimes hold the most challenging jobs at the most unmeager wages. Far too many women of color work in our country for less than $7 an hour. In some instances, $4 or $5 an hour. Essential laborers doing the work that no one oftentimes wants to do. We cannot say we are beacons of democracy when we recognize that not only does race matter, but gender matters as well. See, the nexus of white supremacy and patriarchy has continued to do a number on women of color in this country. We have to be better. Democracy should connect hope, education, and possibility. The French philosopher Albert Camus says that democracy is not the law of the majority, but it's the protection of the minority. So how do we protect that minority? How do we protect the least amongst us? How do we create what my colleague and mentor James Banks calls global citizenship, where we protect the cultural, racial, language identities of all people? We must respond to these questions because we currently have a racial reckoning before us in ways that we've never seen in this country's history. Just a month ago, the U.S. Census Bureau issued new data that says for the first time in our country's history, the white population in America decreased by approximately 8.5%. The fastest growing group of people in our country now are individuals of mixed race background, an increase of 276%. The second fastest growing group in our country are Asian American APIs, an increase of 35%. And the Latinx population, the third fastest growing group, with a population increase of over 23%. We are changing rapidly. UMass Boston, you are the most diverse public institution here in the New England area. You are a mirror into our future. You are diverse, you are working class, you are daughters and sons of immigrants, you are in pursuit of hope, you are in pursuit of education. You represent America in so many ways. Our diversity should be our badge of honor. Our diversity should be seen as our strength. Our diversity should be a symbol of our commitment to democracy. We should never be ashamed or fearful of our diversity. So how can we achieve a better way? Can we reach a racial reckoning where affordable housing, access to quality medical care, the right to vote, and equitable schools are a right and not a privilege? So what will we choose is the question. Will we choose racial realism or radical hope? The great legal mind, Derek Bell, was oftentimes optimistic about what America could do in fulfilling its promise. Derek Bell said that racial equality is in fact not a realistic goal, he said in 1992. He said black people will never gain full equality in this country. Even those Herculean efforts we hail as successful will produce no more than temporary peaks of progress, he wrote. He said short-lived victories that slide into irrelevance as racial patterns adapt in ways that maintain white dominance. And he says this is a hard-to-accept fact that all history verifies. So Derek Bell was not optimistic, but I come from a family and a background of faith and one of hope. Is this our fate? Can we gain education without losing our minds in the process? Can America live up to her goals and her ideals, a promise that we are the beacon of democracy? That remains to be seen. Part of what gives many of us pessimism is that while our diversity has increased, offering the hope and the possibility of cultural, racial, linguistic mosaic, we have to recognize that according to the FBI, hate crimes have increased in 2020 at the highest rates they have in 12 years. So as we become more diverse, we've seen more hate in our country. And the data from the FBI says that hate crimes have increased, and the number one type of hate crime is anti-race-based hate crimes. So while we should be embracing our democracy and embracing our diversity, it scares the living daylights out of some of us. Education hopefully can eradicate prejudice. Education can eradicate ignorance. We have to be better. See, racism manifests itself in lots of ways. I'm reminded of Toni Morrison, who says that racism is oftentimes a distraction. She says the very serious function of racism is a distraction. It keeps you from doing your work. It keeps you explaining over and over again your reason for being, your reason for existing. Somebody says you have no language, you spend 20 years proving that you do. Somebody says your head isn't shaped properly, you spend 20 years with scientists working on the fact that it is. Somebody says that you have no art, so you dredge that up. Somebody says that you have no kingdoms and you have no background, so you dredge that up. None of that is necessary. It's a distraction. In this moment, we must recognize the full humanity of who we all are. We must recognize that we share more in common than we have that's different. What we need now is hope. But we don't need just simple hope. We don't need just gradual hope or progressive hope. I maintain that what we need in this moment is what I would refer to as radical hope. See, radical hope is about a belief in our fundamental and collaborative humanity, our ability to transform the collective way of being to prioritize the most disadvantaged amongst us, and to create a global community centered on love, justice, hope, and healing. See, it's about seeing the best of us. Radical hope says that we acknowledge and embrace the sheer resilience, the sheer brilliance and genius that resides in all of our homes and communities, in particular those on the margins. See, radical hope means that those who walk on this campus every day are oftentimes brimming with potential and possibility. Radical hope says that we recognize that the poorest are oftentimes the richest in being resilient. The immigrants are oftentimes the most resourceful, and the downtrodden oftentimes possess the most optimism and faith for a better tomorrow. The hard-working individuals who wake up every day in search of a better way, a better day, and the faith that prosperity is here and happiness is not merely an elusive concept. If we are committed to radical hope, we must recognize the devastating impact that COVID-19 has had on all of us. But we recognize the way that this devastating virus has also been detrimental upon communities of color, where we see those who are most likely to be affected by COVID-19 are people of color. Those most likely to be hospitalized by COVID-19 are people of color. And sadly, those who are most likely to die from the virus have been people of color. If we're committed to radical hope, we must recognize that we have to understand that the number of people experiencing homelessness and food insecurities will continue to climb even as we continue to come out of this pandemic. We must be committed to providing a multitude of basic services such as food, safety, shelter, access to medical services, quality school, after-school care, the things that so many of our young people need and deserve. If we are committed to radical hope, we have to eliminate hate wherever we see it. We have to recognize that we have to speak out against any legislative action that undermines our democracy. Thus far, we've seen 17 anti-LGBTQ bills that have been enacted into laws in states so far this year. The worst in the last decade, according to the Human Rights Campaign. We have to be better. We can be better. Part of what I'm reminded is that James Baldwin says people who shut their eyes to reality simply invite their own destruction. And anyone who insists on remaining in a state of innocence long after that innocence is dead turns himself into a monster. And I ask the question, are we a nation of monsters? I don't think we are. We can be better. We need to be better. We must pursue education without losing our minds. I maintain that if we're going to attain radical hope, it requires bold and fierce leadership, where leaders challenge, inspire, and encourage us all to do better, where we recognize our shared humanity and our common quest for justice. Fearless leadership in the name of hope requires not being afraid to engage in courageous conversations, taking unpopular stances in the name of righteousness, and making difficult decision-making about what is in the best interest of the common good, and doing what Dr. Martin Luther King calls it, uplifting the beloved community. If we are to create radical hope, we have to create a society that stands up to anti-Blackness, anti-Asian violence, xenophobia, anti-Semitism, anti-Islamophobia. Radical hope is about eliminating indifference and silence. I say in this moment, your silence is complicitness. We can no longer afford to be silent in the face of oppression. I'll say it again. Your silence is being complicit. In this moment, I think we have to listen and learn from our young people about their lives outside of school, the places that they're trying to be their best, and say, what does it require for us to put in front of them people who see the best in them, the brightest in them, who are willing to lift up their hopes and their aspirations. So why is radical hope needed? Because a recent report by the UCLA Center for Health Policy Research reported that 55% of young people between the ages of 12 and 17 reported having struggled with mental health issues during the pandemic. So radical hope means we must have a very honest conversation about mental health in this country. If we're going to have that conversation about mental health, we must recognize that nearly a third of all young people experience serious psychological distress that interfere with their academic and social functioning. We also know the data says that the rates of depression and anxiety have been the highest amongst the poor, multiracial, female, and gender nonconforming students. These data tell us that many of our young people are emotionally frayed and psychologically distressed due to social isolation, disconnection, and COVID fatigue. In this moment, UMass Boston, students' social and emotional well-being should be a priority for all of us, and a focus on relationship building, grace, and empathy matters more now than it has ever meant in our lifetimes. We must be committed to showing radical hope when we take the necessary steps to ensure that our communities have highly trained, culturally responsive service providers in the medical field, education, social services, and mental health. So at the end of the day, we must recognize that radical hope should be less about what we say and more about what we do. How do we show up when we are most needed? How do we speak up when others try to silence us? How do we respond when our friends are silent in the face of adversity? We need practices and an ethos that are rooted in hope, love, and a radical care that sees all of us as being worthy, where we are all seen and where we are all heard. When we as a collective community recognize that within our most overlooked and underserved community exist deep funds of knowledge and a tremendous depth and breadth of cultural wealth, we will all be better. The unrelenting hope that my parents, my grandparents, my great-grandparents possessed, just like yours did. We cannot afford to be small in this moment. We cannot afford to be average in this moment. We cannot afford to be indifferent in this moment. We cannot afford to be silent in this moment. I am asking you, UMass Boston, in this moment to think big, to act big, to walk big, to dream big, and to hope big, just like our foremothers and forefathers did. We must have a bond of empathy and connection as human beings. When we recognize the discomfort of some, we should feel discomfort ourselves. Radical hope is about collective empathy, which is deeply rooted in seeing ourselves in others. Your struggle is my struggle. Your pain is my pain. Your hopelessness is my hopelessness. Your joy is my joy. Your triumph is our triumph. There is a collective conscience that seeks to see the best in all of us, our children, our families, our communities, our nation, and our world. I will close with the powerful words of Gloria Anzaldúa, who tells us that though we tremble before uncertain futures, may we meet illness, death, and adversity with strength. May we dance in the face of our fears. Thank you so much, UMass Boston.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Dr. Howard, your remarks speak to the core of who we are and who we should be at UMass Boston. I want to just, as we come to the close of our convocation here, just build on and reflect some core messages that we've heard here this morning so eloquently and so powerfully. I was so pleased to hear you say over and over again the word beacon. We are beacons, but we are beacons in multiple ways. It's so appropriate that we are the beacons of radical hope here in our community. But there are many challenges before us. Another word we heard throughout this morning. And as we really confront these challenges in this moment of time, Dr. Howard is challenging us to challenge ourselves, to be more, to do more, to have a greater impact in ways that we have not yet imagined. And as we started this session this morning, this convocation, we talked about the pivotal moment that we're in our history, but here at UMass Boston. Radical hope is a springboard as we move forward into what is still our best future, and even as we confront our greatest challenges here at UMass Boston. So without further ado, I welcome back Chancellor Marcelo Suárez-Orozco.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Howard, for your remarks and for being here with us today as we celebrate the opening of an academic year. Dr. Howard, please accept this gift as a reminder of our appreciation for Before I conclude this year's Convocation Ceremony, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the wonderful, wonderful team of staff who worked so hard to make this convocation a possibility. Thank you. Now, please join me and members of the UMass Boston leadership team on the front lawn of our campus center for some good old-fashioned barbecue. We had food for thought. Now we'll have food for food. Thank you kindly.